let's jump right in. We're talking about one of the biggest crises in early American history.
Absolutely. You have this brand new nation, right? They've just beaten the most powerful empire on earth.
And yet it was barely holding together. The first government, the Articles of Confederation, it was more like a suggestion box than a government.
That's a perfect way to put it. I mean, we often forget how close the whole experiment came to just falling apart.
How so?
Well, the central government had basically zero power to enforce laws. And more importantly, it couldn't really collect taxes.
And if you can't collect taxes, you can't pay your debts from the war.
Exactly. You can't have a stable economy. States were acting like 13 little feuding countries, even putting tariffs on each other's goods.
So the fear was real. People thought they were heading for a civil war or, that Europe would just come back and take over. The mission was urgent. They had to create a stronger national authority.
And that's what brings everyone to Philadelphia in May of 1787. You have 55 delegates from 12 of the 13 states.
And they meet in total secrecy inside the Pennsylvania State House.
That secrecy was absolutely vital because they knew pretty quickly that they weren't just there to tweak the old rules.
No, this is the radical part of the story. Their first big decision was to throw out the Articles of Confederation completely, just scrap the whole thing.
And start over. Create an entirely new constitution. It was a political revolution happening in one room over one summer.
Talk about pressure. And to lead the whole thing, they chose George Washington.
Unanimously. He didn't actually say much during the debates, but his presence, just him being there, it gave the whole thing legitimacy and kept it from breaking down.
And the delegates themselves were, they were the elite. Lawyers, merchants, plantation owners.
Very well educated. You had Benjamin Franklin, the oldest at 81, bringing that sense of wisdom.
But the real architect was James Madison.
Oh, absolutely. If Washington was the leader, Madison was the brains. He showed up weeks early, having studied every republic in history that had ever failed.
So he came prepared.
He had a detailed plan ready to go from day one. And thank goodness he took notes every single day, because that's really how we know what happened, all the drama that unfolded.
It was a lot of drama. I mean, you have to remember, key figures like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were out of the country, serving as diplomats.
Right. So the decisions fell to the men in that room, and they were immediately stuck on one huge question. Who gets the power?
Which brings us to the biggest fight of the convention, big states versus small states.
And this is where Madison's plan comes in. It was called the Virginia Plan.
It proposed a really strong central government,
Yeah.
3 separate branches, legislative, executive, and judicial. But the real sticking point was the legislative branch, the Congress.
Yes. The Virginia Plan said representation in Congress, in both houses, should be based on how many people live in each state.
So based on population, if you're from a big state like Virginia, this is perfect for you. You'd get the most votes and basically run the country.
But there was another piece to it that was even more controversial. Madison's plan gave the new national government the power to just veto laws made by individual states.
Wow. So that's a direct threat to the state's power.
It's a huge threat. For the small states, this felt like they were about to be completely erased, their voices drowned out by the big states.
So naturally, they fought back.
They did. They came back with their own proposal, the New Jersey Plan.
And this was much more conservative.
Much.
Mm-hmm.
It basically wanted to keep the structure of the old Articles of Confederation, but just give the government a few more powers, like the power to tax.
And the key feature.
The one-house legislature, where every single state gave exactly one vote. It didn't matter if you were tiny Rhode Island or huge Pennsylvania. One state, one vote.
Equal power.
Equal power.
Yeah.
And this created a complete deadlock. The convention almost fell apart right there.
So how did they solve it?
With a compromise, what we now call the Great Compromise.
This was the idea from Roger Sherman of Connecticut.
It was. And it was an elegant solution, really. He said, why not do both? Let's make a legislature with 2 houses.
A bicameral legislature.
Exactly. So in the first house, the House of Representatives, you satisfy the big states. Representation is based on population. The more people, the more seats you get.
Okay, that makes sense.
But in the second house, the Senate, you satisfy the small states. Every single state gets exactly 2 senators. Equal power.
That compromise probably saved the entire convention.
It really did. It showed they were willing to find a middle ground for the sake of creating a new nation.
But as soon as they solved that problem, a much darker one came up. Slavery.
Yeah. This led to another much more painful negotiation. The 3/5 compromise.
So what was the conflict here?
Well, the southern states wanted to count their enslaved population when they were figuring out how many representatives they'd get in the House.
To get more power, basically.
To get more political power, yes. But the northern states immediately pointed out the hypocrisy.
How could you count people for representation when you treat them as property and don't let them vote?
That was the argument. It was just fundamentally unfair. It would inflate the South's power in the government.
So what was the final deal they made?
The deal was this. They agreed that 3 out of every 5 enslaved people would be counted, both for representation in Congress and for calculating how much a state would pay in federal taxes.
It's a brutal political calculation.
It is. It was a compromise that allowed the Constitution to move forward to get that Southern support. But it was a moral tragedy. They kicked the can down the road on the issue of slavery, and that decision would haunt the country for decades.
Okay, so with the legislature's structure set, they moved on to the other branches. Let's talk about the executive branch, the president.
This is a huge point of fear for the delegates. They just fought a war to get rid of the king. The last thing they wanted was another one.
But they knew they needed a strong leader, someone to enforce the laws, lead the military.
Someone who could act decisively. Their solution was a president serving a 4-year term. But the question of how to pick the president was really debated.
Some wanted Congress to do it.
Right, but then the president would be too dependent on them. Others were worried about a direct popular vote. They were afraid the public could be swayed by, a charismatic but dangerous leader.
So they invented something new, the Electoral College.
Exactly. It's a complex system, another compromise. The people vote, but their votes are actually choosing electors at the state level.
And those electors are the ones who formally choose the president.
Right. It was a way to balance the popular will with the power and interests of the individual states.
And they built in limits on the president's power from the start.
Oh, absolutely. The president can veto a law from Congress. But Congress can turn around and override that veto with a 2/3 vote. It's a built-in power struggle.
That constant tension seems to be the key to the whole system, which brings us to the third branch, the judicial, the courts.
They needed a referee, an ultimate interpreter of the law. So they created the Supreme Court as the highest court in the land.
And the really groundbreaking idea here was to make the judges independent.
Completely independent. Federal judges are given lifetime appointments as long as they maintain, quote, good behavior.
Why is that lifetime appointment so important?
Because it insulates them from politics. A judge doesn't have to worry about being reelected or making the president or Congress happy. They can make decisions based purely on the law and the Constitution without fear of losing their job.
So their main role is to make sure every law follows the rules of the Constitution.
That's it. They are the ultimate check on the power of the other 2 branches.
Which is the perfect lead-in to maybe the most brilliant part of the whole design, the system of checks and balances.
It really is. It was designed specifically to prevent any one part of the government from becoming a tyranny.
The idea is that ambition is made to counteract ambition, right?
Precisely. Instead of just hoping you elect good, virtuous people, the structure itself forces the branches to watch each other and compete with each other.
So let's walk through an example.
Okay. Congress passes a bill. That's its legislative power.
But the president can stop it with a veto? That's the executive check on the legislature.
But it's not over. Congress can then override that veto with a supermajority, a 2/3 vote.
So that's a legislative check back on the executive.
Right. And then, even if that law passes, years later, the Supreme Court can hear a case about it and declare that the law violates the Constitution.
And strike it down, the judicial check on both of them. It's this constant cycle.
It is. And we also have to touch on the economy, because that was really the problem that started this whole convention.
Right. The old government couldn't manage trade or money.
So you had a divide. The North, which was more about shipping and industry, wanted the national government to control all trade.
For consistency.
Yes. But the South, which relied on exporting crops like tobacco and rice, was terrified that the new government would just slap heavy taxes on their exports.
And tax them out of business.
So another compromise was made. The national government got the power to regulate all trade between states and with other countries, a huge power.
Oh.
But the Constitution explicitly says the government cannot tax exports. That protected the Southern economy.
And there was one more piece to that deal, wasn't there?
Yes, a very dark one. They agreed the government could not ban the international slave trade for at least another 20 years. Once again, a moral issue was sacrificed for political unity.
So the document is finally written,
Yeah.
signed. But the work wasn't over.
Not even close. It still had to be ratified, approved by at least 9 of the 13 states, and this kicked off a huge nationwide public debate
And the country split into two camps.
immediately. On one side, you had the Federalists. They supported the Constitution. They wanted a strong national government, and they thought this was the only way for the nation to survive.
And on the other side?
The Anti-Federalists. They were afraid the new government was too powerful. They worried it would crush individual liberty, the very thing they fought the revolution for. They pointed out that there was no list of protected rights.
No Bill of Rights.
Exactly. And that became their biggest demand. To get key states like Virginia and New York to ratify, the Federalists had to make a promise.
They promised that as soon as the new government was up and running, the first thing they would do is add a Bill of Rights.
And they did. Those first 10 amendments, protecting freedoms like speech, religion, and the press. That was the final piece of the puzzle that made people feel secure enough to accept this powerful new system.
And in June 1788, New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify.
And the Constitution officially became the law of the land. It's amazing to think that this document, born out of all that conflict and compromise, is still the oldest written national constitution in use in the world.
It's a powerful legacy.
It is. It shows that a stable government isn't about having a perfect system, but about designing one with checks and balances that requires constant effort to keep everything in balance.
Good luck with your studies.